Ironically enough, while I was watching the TED Talk in preparation for today's show last Thursday, I got a tweet from my dad about a conversation on Twitter between two sports talk radio personalities. Matt Speigel and Dan Bernstein are the hosts on the CBS-owned station The Score in Chicago. Wednesday night, Speigel tweeted about watching Comcast Sportsnet sideline reporter Aiyana Cristal's stilted on-air delivery, and Bernstein replied with a rather crass comment about her body. And their back and forth went on for more than 20 minutes on Twitter, focusing on her body, not her work. As you can imagine, social media blew up, and I was one of those screaming from the top of my cyber lungs, something that both of you know I don't do often. As a former WSCR intern and one-time wannabe sports reporter, I'm outraged that in 2015 this is still happening and women are seen as sex objects before we're seen as journalists. Both men went on the air the day after and apologized. You can listen to their full apologies on the Links blog if you're so inclined, but I have to say, while Dan Bernstein and Matt Speigel are responsible, in my opinion at least, for the words that they said, the things they said, maybe they're not the only ones to blame here, that the culture of sports talk radio has a lot too.
Yes, I mean, we've talked about that on the show as well, is that, you know, in sports, they tend to think that they can get away with some of these things, but that's not happening anymore. You can put it, if you put it on your blog, if you tweet about it, if you say it on the air, you're going to get called out because it's going to travel throughout the internet, blogosphere, or whatever you want to call it. And when it gets out there, you're going to have people attack you, and then you're going to have to deal with it. And I tell my students all the time, it's not what you meant to do, because that's what they say in the apologies. It's what you did, and that's what sticks with you. And until their employers start dealing with them in a much harsher way, you're going to continue to see some of this.
See, and I think, and I realize, Mike, 1 second, I think one of the things we need to talk about here, though, is the role that the employers play. I went and I did some research to see what the makeups of the staff is at some of these stations. And at WSCR, if you take a look at the editorial employees who are bylined, there are 22 people who are either identified as on-air hosts, reporters, or bloggers online. In that group, there are 22 people. 20 of them are white males, 2 of them are males of color, or persons of color. That's going to help breed some of these attitudes and thinking about how you treat other people.
Yeah. Well, and who knows what may ultimately happen, but the station hasn't taken any disciplinary action against either one of them. I will give, I shouldn't say it that way. I was going to say give him credit. I'm not giving him credit, but at least Bernstein made a real apology. We talk about the kinds of apologies that people normally make when they're caught in a situation like this. I mean, at least he said, I was stupid. I own it. I wish I'd had a second thought about sending it. I mean, he gave about as full-throated an apology publicly as one might give. But I want to bring it back to this notion of, who's ultimately responsible? And I get a little bit pessimistic when I look at the fact that as you've heard me say many, many times, with the social media fueled culture we have today, are you going to get rid of the trolls? Are you going to get rid of the people saying stupid stuff online? Maybe not. But pull it back to Monica Lewinsky for a second and look at how now young women are coming out and supporting her when they didn't before. Maybe because they know with their experience with social media and how everything about their private life is recorded forever, maybe they're a little bit more sensitive and maybe they will help us do something about it.
And that's a generational change. I mean, I was in college when the Monica Lewinsky story broke, so I'm actually just a couple of years younger than she is. The people who are now our age, or the people who are currently the age that we were at that time, have been the digital natives raised in this social media environment. I do want to go back, though, and talk for a little bit about hiring in that sports talk genre and come back to it. WMVP, the ESPN radio station, has 12 editorial employees, and in that group there were 2 people of color and 1 woman. How do we get past that? How do we open up the doors and create a more inclusive environment?
Well, I think one of the things that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to look much deeper in sports. And what I mean by that is there are women who are knowledgeable about the various sports that we in this country have grown attached to, and they can tell those stories, and they need to be included in the mix. That hasn't happened in sports radio. It's been this sort of where jocks and wannabe jocks sort of live and cultivate and in a lot of ways grow their own. They aren't expanding in terms of bringing in people who are unlike them. And I think that's what needs to be happening.
And in sports television, I mean, I will not say that beauty and brains are mutually exclusive, but when it comes to hiring women sports correspondents, the first thing that most male executives do is look for the beauty, and then they hope the brains follows. If we could do something to be a little bit more open about finding the right talent and putting them on the air, then we'd all be better off.
Yeah, but, I hate to say this, and this sounds bad no matter how I put it, but in radio, looks don't matter.
Right.
Well, that's
that
true.
shouldn't be an issue.
We're
talking about
radio. But they
radio.
were talking about a TV person.
True, they were talking about a TV person, but the fact that there's one woman involved in sports talk radio in a market like Chicago, where your ownership is CBS, where your ownership is ESPN and Disney, what's happening is that this issue is going to keep coming up, and as it gains traction, it's going to force them to do some things because, as you've talked about, things are going to change.